Hi, I'd like to share a couple of fundamentals which I believe can really help you achieve financial independence, and certainly put in place a couple of goals and some milestones and steps along the way that can help you do that. I found with my clients there's some fundamental questions that they normally ask me and that are actually quite simple to answer, but we need to obviously answer those and put those steps into place so that we can really make a difference in our lives financially. And I'd like to answer these questions for you in the next couple of videos and share how we actually achieve those and how we get there. Before we go there, it doesn't matter where you are in your life, these questions can actually help you fundamentally. Whether you're 25 years old and you're just starting out in your career, whether you're 45 years old, whether you're 70 years and into your retirement, answering these questions and giving you the guidelines can make a fundamental difference, and I'd really like to share those with you. So stay with us here. My name's Dave Donnelly. I'm going to be taking through these couple of videos and sharing my insight and my background with you. I've spent a lot of time with my clients and I want to share that experience with you and share that knowledge with you. I'd like to go inside and I'm going to go through some illustrations on the whiteboard which will give you some more specifics about what we now need to look at each part in your life, and what we need to maybe put some milestones in place and some goals in place as we go through. Okay, so here we are right in front of the whiteboard. Big question we are asking ourselves then, can we afford to retire, or when can we afford to retire? This is the sort of big question, and the reason for this big question is that the statistics show us that less than 10% of people get to afford to retire on the same kind of income as what they were receiving prior to retirement. In other words, if they were receiving 10,000 Rand as an income prior to their retirement, they were looking at getting 10,000 Rand during their retirement. And only less than 10% of people actually achieve that situation. Most people only are able to get sort of 40, 60, 70% of what their pre-retirement income was as a retirement income. So let's have a look through a couple of, or an example here. Let's look through our life, as it were, over a period of time. And I'm going to go through it right from zero, right at the start here. This is the value line here, or the value axis, the x-axis, and the one across the bottom here is your timeline, in other words, your age. So we're going to start here age 0, that's when you're born, age 20, 35, 55, 60, and then through to 90, and hopefully we even live longer than 90 if we're lucky and healthy and strong. So where do we start off? Let's have a look here. So for the first 20 or so years, your parents pretty much look after you. You get yourself a good education, they look after you at university and so forth, and then you're pretty much out on your own. Around about 25-ish, we start earning an income, we start becoming responsible for our own financial lifestyles, and that's when we start getting into a situation where we've got expenses and so forth. We get our first job. Okay, then all of a sudden we're starting to pay for our month-to-month expenses, our car expenses. We buy our first car. Then we go through and we're probably going to get married. Part of the exciting part of our lives, we're going to get married and then probably buy a nice house. So what I want to do, I just want to plot what I see as your capital profile as you go through life. So in other words, as time goes by, we want to see what your total worth is on a net basis. In other words, if you, let's say, bought a house, you're probably going to go into debt to the tune of a couple of 100,000 Rand, maybe a couple of million Rand. So let's plot that net capital or net value course as we go through life, because ultimately what we need to do is end up at a retirement date, let's say around about 55 or 60, where you need a substantial amount of capital, and we'll exclude your lifestyle assets here. I'll come back to that, but we need a certain amount of capital that's going to give you enough to retire financially secure, financially independent, and be enough money that's going to generate enough income for you to live for the rest of your life during your retirement. So let's go through this step by step. I'm going to go through it in sort of 4 sections. Section 1, in essence, as we've spoken about, is your sort of pre-working time, the time that your parents have looked after you. Section 2 is going to be sort of the start of your life, where you're out on your own and you make all those sort of changes in your life, buy your first car, your home, and so forth. The third section here is going to be when you're sort of maturing in your life, in your job, in your career, and so forth. Your kids are probably getting a little bit older now, going to university and so forth. So it's that sort of stage of your life. And then 55, 60, 65, your retirement age. And then the rest of this, your section 4 here, is going to be your retirement, obviously. So let's plot that graph before I talk too much. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about up to the age of 20. Then once we get to the age of 20, I'm just going to rub this 2 out here. It's a little bit in the way. Okay, so once we get to the age of 20, then we buy our first car, and we probably don't have a lot of assets at that stage. So what does our capital situation look like? In essence, let's just say we buy a car, it's 200,000 Rand. Let's just take an estimate, and let's plot, and let's do that at, let's say, 23. So in essence, if your capital profile then will be into negative. We've got 0 here, we've got negative down this way and positive up this way. Then we're going into negative, aren't we? Because we're purchasing our first vehicle. And then slowly we start paying that off. So slowly our negativeness, as it were, if I can put it that way, gets less and less. Then we're probably going to go and get married. Okay, we'll get married, and then probably as a husband and wife, you want to go and buy your first house. You want to own your property potentially. So let's say by the age of 28, 30, you want to then buy your own home. So if we take 30, let's just take 30 years here. So you've paid your car off a bit, and then you go into a nice big amount of debt. Let's just say it's R1 million, okay, your first home. So your debt comes right down to, let's say, minus R1 million down at the bottom here. Okay, so your capital profile has now dropped right down to there. And you slowly start paying it off. Hopefully you've got some sort of idea, or you've obviously got a payment plan with the bank or whoever you borrowed the money from, and you slowly start paying that off. But then come along the kids and so forth, and obviously your capital situation or your cash flow situation comes under pressure. You've got kids' education to pay for, and probably higher medical aid, more food to buy, nappies to buy, whatever the case may be. So that's life. So yeah, so you probably find your ability to start paying off capital here is quite squeezed. It's quite tight. And I think it's natural for most of us. Anyway, let's just assume we do fairly well. Just going to rub out this little blue bit here. And your capital profile slowly comes up, and you get into a net 0 situation by the age of, let's say, 40, 45. Let's say 45. Okay? And only at that stage then do you find yourself in a situation where you're in positive asset territory, if I can put it that way. Okay, and then you start saving, and you save as much as you can, because by the time you get to retirement, you want to be at a situation where you've got enough capital. But let's just see where we're going. We get to retirement, let's just say it's 60, okay, and we've got X amount of capital. And if we've done actually no planning and calculations for ourselves, we end up in a situation where we kind of don't know if we've got enough, do we? So at that point, we're a little bit stuck, because we're not sure if we've got enough, and where do we go to from here? We've gone through the sort of pre-retirement stage of life, and as if we haven't done any planning, as it were. So we've plotted that capital course, and we're not quite sure if we're going to end up with our capital kind of running out like that, or whether it's actually going to be sufficient and then run out after age 90, whatever the case may be. So we've got a big question in our minds, and let's just go back to the start again, and I just want to sort of pinpoint some areas that can potentially help you and guide you along the way. Okay, firstly, obviously until you net negative, you don't have to be too concerned about anything. But as soon as you start borrowing money, let's say in this situation you buy your first car, we said it is 200,000 Rand. If something should happen to you at that stage and you had to pass away, you owe the bank 200,000 Rand. If your estate has got no way of paying that 200,000 Rand, you've got a problem. So just point number one here, we need to be very aware of a situation where as soon as we're in a situation of debt, we need to be able to solve that one. We need to be able to put our estate in a position to be able to pay off its debt should anything happen to us. Likewise, we then get married. We've now got a spouse we're looking after, or potentially looking after each other. But then we go and buy a home and we get ourselves into a whole lot more debt. Okay, as much as we're earning maybe a really nice income, our net capital situation in our estate is actually negative. And should anything happen to either of us, then we're in a situation where we owe quite a bit of money. Let's just take the situation of husband and wife. Husband, let's say they both earn the same amount of money. That's fine. And something happens to the husband and he's no longer around to assist with the repayments on the home. If he then is no longer on the scene, he leaves his wife in a situation where she owes, let's say, potentially R1 million, whatever the case may be. And now with half the amount of income, she needs to now pay this debt off as if they were earning that full double income, family income. So that puts her under a huge amount of stress. So immediately what you need to do is make sure that between yourself and your spouse, you need to put yourselves in a situation where you know that if something happens to either of you, that you don't leave the other one in a huge amount of debt situation. Okay, that's fundamentally hugely important. Very important to start off with. I think a lot of people forget about that. Okay, so that's for starters. Then as we go along, if we haven't planned and we don't know where we're going, we've got no idea of where our goals are and so forth. So we buy a house, we have kids, we need to educate our kids. Certainly as we go along there, let's just talk about the kids coming on the scene as well. All of a sudden, once again, if you left or you or your spouse left this planet, you leave them in a situation where they need to maintain the whole family as well. So once again, you may need to, once you start having a family, look at a situation where what would that situation be if you had to take one of those incomes out of the family income situation. You need to look at that very carefully. How do you want to leave your spouse should something happen to you? That should go both ways, and it's a very important conversation. I know some people find it a little bit difficult, but it's really, really important to address as soon as possible. And important to make sure you budget all the way through. Make sure you understand where your spendings are, what your spendings are, what your savings are more importantly, but we'll come back to those. Okay, and you might be in a situation where you've got your own business and feel that, okay, by the time you retire one day, that you can just sell your business and retire and that's your retirement. My suggestion to you is to be very careful of that thinking, because yes, as much as it is a nice asset that you have along the way, that business can so easily be taken away from you, and situations change and something happens and all of a sudden you don't have that business. So I would always suggest that you have alternatives to that scenario as well. Okay, so be very careful of that thinking. And then obviously, once we get to retirement, we need to make sure that we know that we've saved enough. So along the way, we need to have some sort of plan, don't we? We need to make sure that we ensure that we reach our retirement date with having sufficient capital. If we get ourselves into a situation where we get to retirement date and we haven't actually measured and achieved our goal, the feeling of getting there and finding out that you don't have enough capital is a really gut-wrenching situation. I've sat with people in that situation. It's really not a nice feeling to have and not a nice situation to be in and have to anticipate going forward. Okay, so what sort of situation do we want to find ourselves in, or what sort of situation do we want to put ourselves in if we look here? Obviously, as I've gone through each of these different alternatives, we need to make sure that we cover our debt situation. We have our financial planning done to a point that we know that we're not going to leave our spouse or our estate in a situation where they cannot actually pay the debt that we've got ourselves into. That's vitally important. And then especially the day we start earning an income, we need to make sure that we take responsibility for saving for the long term. It's hugely important. This ultimate goal, although it can be a long way off and it seems quite irrelevant to start saving at this point in time, the best way you can actually start saving is early. Make an early start. The power of compounding is phenomenal. It's going to help you along the way fundamentally. And to have that goal in mind all the way along, so you have a savings period of 35, 40 years, whatever it may be, it can put you into a fundamentally much stronger situation in your life. And especially at retirement date, have that goal in mind always. So you end up with a situation where you know that your capital profile is going to put you in a safe capital situation at the end of the day. Okay, so there are basically a couple of fundamental steps or fundamental points that we need to have in place here as we go through our lives. Firstly, we need to make sure that we know where we are at any point in our life. We need to know financially where we stand at every single point along that graph. If we do that, we can always anticipate and know what we've got to do going forward. Okay, we've got to have a clear goal. The second point, we've got to have a clear goal. We need to know that capital amount. We need to know that we're on track. And we need to be able to measure that. Even if we're down here in a situation we're right at the start, we need to know what that is going to take as far as savings are concerned to be able to put us in that safe situation and then be able to achieve a profile that gives us a situation where we've got sufficient capital. So you've got to have a plan. The third point is you've got to have a plan. So you've got to know where you are, you've got to know where you're going, and you've got to have a plan. And therefore, or finally, obviously, you need to make sure that you implement that plan. Okay, it's no good having a plan and you don't put it in place. You know where you want to go, but you don't actually do anything about getting there. That's obviously defeating the whole point and fundamentally important. Okay, but before you can have all of this and before you can actually do all of this, you need to understand what you're dealing with. You've got to have a good idea of finances, basically. Even if it's basic finances, you need to understand what you're dealing with and how to deal with these things. And then from that knowledge base, you can actually put that plan in place, because then you understand what you're dealing with and you can actually make it work for you. So that's a hugely important point. Okay, and that's what we actually want to deal with in the next video. We want to make sure, and we want to guide you, give you some pointers initially on how to actually put that plan together. How do we actually make sure that at every point in our lives, we know that we're going to achieve the goals we need to achieve, whether it's short-term goals, whether it's covering the debt, whether it's interim goals and making sure we can finance our kids' education, or whether it's longer-term goals and making sure that we can retire financially independent. Each part of that goal setting and plan setting is fundamentally important, and that's what we would like to share with you in the next video. So I hope that little discussion and that illustration has given you a little bit more perspective about how we need to think about our lives from a financial perspective, and going forward what we need to plan into our financial plans to be able to achieve the goals we want to achieve in our lives. And that's essentially what we want to do in this program. There's a couple of videos. I want to be able to help you achieve those goals and put some fundamental planning into place, and that's what we're going to do through the rest of these videos. So I hope that's helped. If you feel that this has been a useful little introductory video for you and you'd like to share it with some of your friends, there's a little funny little button up the top here on the video. That's your share button. Please share the video on your Facebook and so forth, and we'd love to spread our word around and try and give as much people information and guidance on financial planning as possible. This is a free set of videos, so please share, and we'd love to see you in the rest of the videos. We've got some fantastic information. The next video is going to help you put a plan into place, so we're going to give you those specific guidelines to put your plan into place. So we look forward to seeing you in the next video then. Fantastic. Cheers.